The morning light filtered through the crystalline windows of Lion's mountain dwelling, casting prismatic patterns across the polished stone floor. The young Arvinian xenobiologist moved with practiced efficiency, her six-fingered hands organizing specimen containers and research instruments into her travel case. Her iridescent skin, a characteristic of her species, shimmered with a mix of blue and purple hues that betrayed her anxiety. "Asgar, come," she called, her voice echoing through the spacious living quarters nestled into the mountainside. A low rumble responded from the adjacent room, followed by the heavy padding of what sounded like multiple feet. The creature that emerged was impressive by any standard, standing nearly as tall as Lion herself, with a muscular body covered in thick scales that transitioned from deep crimson at the spine to burnished gold along the underbelly. 6 powerful limbs moved with surprising grace as the thyroid approached its master, its triangular head adorned with a crown of protective ridges, and 3 violet eyes that blinked independently of each other. Lion reached out to stroke the creature's head, avoiding the sensitive ridges. I know. You don't like it when I leave." The thyroid, Asgar, emitted a purring growl and nuzzled against her palm. For all its fearsome appearance, the bond between them was undeniable. From her panoramic windows, Lion could see the vast expanse of the Vidya mountain range stretching toward the horizon. Her home, situated near the border of the officially mapped territory, provided both isolation for her research and proximity to the wilderness that harbored the species she studied. It was rare for an Arvinian to choose such a remote location, but Lion had always preferred the company of diverse species to that of her own kind. Except, perhaps, for the company of the Arvinian Science Council, whose quarterly gathering she was now preparing to attend. 3 standard days, she murmured to Asgar, checking the timepiece embedded in her wrist communicator. "I'll be gone for 3 days, and I still haven't found anyone willing to care for you," she sighed, her skin shifting to a deeper blue. Most Arvinians feared thyroids, considering them dangerous predators, unfit for domestication. Few understood what Lion had discovered, that, beneath their fearsome exterior, thyroids possessed remarkable intelligence and emotional capacity. The communication panel on her wall emitted a soft chime, indicating an incoming message. Lion tapped the responsive surface, and a holographic image materialized in the center of the room, an administrative assistant from the Science Council. "Xenobiologist Lion," the assistant greeted formally. "The Council wishes to remind you that your presentation on the adaptive behaviors of ridgebacked serpents is scheduled for the first session tomorrow. Additionally, Counselor Terran has requested a private meeting regarding your recent funding proposal." Lion's skin brightened slightly at the mention of Terran, one of the few progressive voices on the Council. "Thank you. Please inform Counselor Terran that I look forward to our discussion." As the hologram dissipated, Lion returned to her packing, her thoughts racing. The presentation was crucial. Her research funding depended on it. But the meeting with Terran could be even more significant. Her proposal to expand protected territories in the Vidya range had been controversial, challenging long-established boundaries and classification protocols. "What am I going to do with you?" she asked Asgar, who had settled onto a heated platform designed specifically for the creature's comfort. "I've contacted everyone I know who might be willing to stay here, and they've all declined." She couldn't blame them. Thyroids had a fearsome reputation, and Asgar was particularly large for his species. The mountain dwelling's external sensors triggered a subtle alert. Someone was approaching via the transport platform. Lion frowned, her skin pulsing with uncertainty. She wasn't expecting visitors, and few people knew the location of her remote home. Through the security monitor, she observed a transport pod docking at her arrival platform. The sleek design was unfamiliar, not Arvinian in origin. When the door slid open, a human male stepped out, adjusting what appeared to be an atmospheric adapter at his throat. Humans were rare on Arvin, their physiology requiring assistance to comfortably breathe the planet's oxygen-rich atmosphere. Lion activated the external communication system. "Identify yourself," she requested, her tone professional but cautious. The human looked directly at the sensor, offering a gesture that Lion recognized as a human smile. "Dylan Harrison," he replied, his voice slightly modulated by the adapter. "I'm the new biosecurity consultant assigned to the Vidya Research District. I'm conducting introductory visits to all registered xenobiologists in the sector." Lion hesitated, her gaze shifting between the monitor and Asgar, who had raised his head in alert curiosity. Visitors from the Science Council rarely ventured to her remote location, preferring to communicate via hologram. Still, the credentials displayed on her monitor appeared authentic. "Please wait while I verify your authorization," she responded, quickly accessing the Council's security database. To her surprise, Dylan Harrison was indeed listed, a human specialist contracted from Earth to enhance biosecurity protocols across Arvinian research facilities. With lingering reluctance, Lion activated the platform extension that would allow the human to reach her entrance. Asgar moved to her side, his posture protective. "Stay calm," she instructed the Tyroid, though she wasn't certain whether the warning was for her pet or herself. When the entrance panel slid open, Lion was struck by how different humans appeared in person compared to holographic representations. Dylan Harrison stood slightly taller than her, with skin that showed no luminescence or color shifts, just a uniform tan tone that reminded her of the desert sands beyond the mountain range. His hair, a feature Arvinians lacked, was dark and cut short, and his eyes remained a constant, deep blue. "Xenobiologist Lion," he greeted, inclining his head in a gesture of respect. "Thank you for—" His words halted abruptly as he noticed Asgar, whose three eyes were now fixed intently on the visitor. That's a Tyroid," he stated, his voice a mixture of surprise and something Lion couldn't quite identify. Was it fear? Fascination? "Yes," Lion confirmed, moving subtly to position herself between her pet and the human. "Asgar has been with me for 7 standard years. He's fully domesticated." Dylan's expression transformed into what Lion would later learn was a grin. "Incredible. I've read about Tyroids, of course, but I never expected to see one in a domestic setting. The Council's classification describes them as Category 4 predators, unsuitable for proximity to sentient species." Lion's skin darkened defensively. The Council's classification system is often conservative in its assessment of non-Arvinian species. To her surprise, Dylan nodded in agreement. Most bureaucratic systems are, whether on Earth or across the galaxy. Officials prefer neat categories to messy biological realities. He took a careful step forward, his gaze still on Asgar. "May I?" Lion hesitated. Few visitors showed any interest in approaching Asgar, and those who did rarely had benign intentions. But something in the human's genuine curiosity resonated with her own scientific mindset. "Approach slowly," she advised. "Allow him to scent you first. He's not accustomed to humans." Dylan followed her instructions with unexpected precision, extending his hand palm down at a respectful distance from Asgar's sensitive nasal ridges. The Tyroid leaned forward, inhaling deeply, his middle eye narrowing while the outer two remained wide and alert. "Fascinating respiratory structure," Dylan murmured. "The divided nasal passages must enhance his olfactory capabilities tremendously." Lion observed with growing interest. "You seem knowledgeable about xenobiology for a security consultant." Dylan maintained his position as Asgar completed his olfactory assessment. "My primary specialty is biosecurity, but my background is in comparative xenobiology, with a focus on predator species." Earth's interplanetary exchange program selected me for this assignment because of my dual expertise. After several tense moments, Asgar made a decision. The Tyroid lowered his head slightly and moved forward, allowing Dylan's hand to make contact with the smooth scales between his eyes. "Remarkable," Dylan whispered, carefully initiating a gentle stroking motion. "His scales are much softer than I anticipated. The texture is almost velvety, despite the apparent rigidity." Lion couldn't hide her astonishment, her skin flickering with rapid pulses of light. "He rarely accepts strangers so quickly. It took my research assistant almost a full seasonal cycle to earn that level of trust." As if to emphasize her point, Asgar emitted a low, harmonic purr, a sound he typically reserved for Lion herself. "I've always had a way with animals," Dylan explained, continuing his gentle petting. "Even the most dangerous ones usually just want to be understood." He glanced at Lion with evident enthusiasm. "This is an extraordinary opportunity. The Council's records indicate that no one has successfully maintained a long-term domestic relationship with a Tyroid before you." An idea began to form in Lion's mind, one that seemed simultaneously perfect and preposterous. "Mr. Harrison." "Dylan, please." "Dylan," she corrected. "I find myself in an unexpected predicament. I'm required to attend the Council's quarterly session, which means 3 days away from my residence. I've been unable to find anyone willing to care for Asgar during my absence." The human's eyebrows rose, another expressive feature Arvinians lacked. "Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" "Would you consider it?" Lion asked, surprised by her own directness. "You clearly have a rapport with him, and your credentials suggest you're qualified to handle a Category 4 species." Dylan glanced around the spacious dwelling, then back at Asgar, who had settled contentedly under his touch. "I'm scheduled to conduct security assessments in the Central Research District over the next few days. But—" he paused, appearing to consider something. "Those could be rescheduled. The opportunity to observe a domesticated Tyroid in its home environment would be invaluable from a research perspective." "It would be a significant favor," Lion acknowledged, her skin brightening with hope. "And perhaps an opportunity for cultural exchange. Few humans have experienced extended stays in Arvinian dwellings." Dylan's smile returned. "Consider it done. I'll need to make a few arrangements, but I can return this evening before your departure." Relief washed over Lion, manifesting as a wave of luminescence across her skin. "Thank you. I'll prepare detailed instructions for Asgar's care." As Dylan departed to make his arrangements, Lion couldn't help but feel a strange mixture of emotions. The unexpected solution to her problem had arrived in the form of an even more unexpected visitor. And though she had just met him, something about the human's genuine interest in Asgar, in understanding rather than fearing him, resonated deeply with her own approach to the universe's diverse life forms. Little did she know that this chance encounter would set in motion events that would challenge everything she thought she knew about Tyroids, about humans, and about the delicate balance between scientific discovery and established knowledge. Hours later, with her transport pod programmed for the journey to the Council headquarters, Lion conducted a final review of her dwelling systems. Dylan had returned as promised, carrying a small pack of personal items and a data tablet filled with notes on Tyroid physiology. "The environmental controls are automated," she explained, pointing to the central command panel. "Asgar prefers a temperature of approximately 37 degrees during the day, 32 at night. The feeding system will dispense his nutrition at these scheduled times, but he enjoys the interaction of manual feeding if you're comfortable with that." Dylan nodded, absorbing the information with evident interest. "What about exercise? Does he require outdoor access?" "The lower level has a secure exercise area, with access to a small enclosed portion of the mountainside," Lion explained, leading him to a spiral staircase carved directly into the stone. "I usually accompany him for an hour each morning and evening. He's capable of self-regulation, but the stimulation is important for his mental well-being. As they descended to the lower level, Asgar followed closely, occasionally nudging Dylan's hand as if already comfortable with his temporary caretaker. "He seems to have accepted me completely," Dylan remarked. "Is that typical?" Lion shook her head, her skin pulsing with a pattern that expressed confusion. "No, it's quite unusual. Tyroids are normally territorial and suspicious of outsiders. His behavior with you is unprecedented in my experience." They reached the exercise area, a spacious chamber with various climbing structures and enrichment devices. A reinforced door led to the external enclosure, which offered a spectacular view of the lower mountain slopes, while keeping Asgar safely contained. "Everything appears straightforward enough," Dylan said confidently. "I'm sure we'll manage just fine. Won't we, Asgar?" The Tyroid responded with a harmonious rumble, pressing his massive head against Dylan's side. Lion found herself experiencing an unfamiliar emotion, a mixture of relief and something else she couldn't quite identify. Was it envy at the immediate bond between her pet and this stranger? Or perhaps concern about leaving Asgar in someone else's care for the first time? "My communication details are programmed into the home system," she said, her voice betraying a slight tremor. "If you have any questions or concerns, you can reach me instantly." Dylan seemed to sense her apprehension. "He'll be fine. I promise. This isn't my first time caring for a complex species." His reassuring smile triggered another unfamiliar reaction in Lion, a momentary flutter in her respiratory system that she attributed to pre-journey stress. "Very well," she conceded, turning toward the staircase. "I should depart if I'm to reach the council chambers by morning." At the entrance to her dwelling, Lion paused for a final goodbye to Asgar, who nuzzled against her affectionately. "Behave yourself," she murmured to him, stroking his ridged head. To Dylan, she added more formally, "Thank you again for your assistance. It's greatly appreciated." As her transport pod descended from the mountain landing platform, Lion found herself looking back at her home with an unusual sense of anticipation. For the first time in years, she was curious about what might occur in her absence, about what new understanding might emerge from this unexpected arrangement. The council meetings awaited, with their formal protocols and political maneuverings. But somehow, those seemed less significant now than the thought of what discoveries might await her return. Dylan watched the transport pod disappear into the distance before turning his attention back to the dwelling and its remaining occupant. Asgar stood beside him, all three eyes tracking the departing vehicle until it vanished from sight. "Well, my friend," Dylan said, placing a gentle hand on the Tyroid's scaled back. "It looks like it's just you and me now. What shall we do first?" The Tyroid tilted his head, the gesture remarkably communicative, despite the alien physiology. Dylan had worked with numerous extraterrestrial species during his career, but something about Asgar was different. There was an intelligence in those violet eyes that went beyond instinct or conditioning. Dylan consulted the care instructions Lion had provided. The evening feeding wasn't scheduled for another 2 hours, which left time for exploration and familiarization with the dwelling systems. "Let's have a look around, shall we? I'd like to understand your environment better." Asgar seemed to comprehend, leading the way back inside with purposeful strides. The dwelling itself was a marvel of Arvinian architecture, carved directly into the mountainside, with rooms that flowed organically from one to another. Crystal formations embedded in the walls provided natural illumination, supplemented by soft, ambient lighting that adjusted automatically to the time of day. Dylan accessed the central command panel, reviewing the environmental settings and security protocols. Everything was meticulously organized, reflecting Lion's scientific mindset. Personal items were sparse, but research materials were abundant: specimen containers, analytical equipment, and data storage devices filled several recessed shelves. "Your mistress is quite the dedicated scientist," Dylan remarked to Asgar, who had settled onto his heated platform to observe the humans' activities. "I've read some of her published work. Her theories on interspecies communication are quite progressive for Arvinian academia." As he continued his exploration, Dylan noticed a secure laboratory area adjacent to the main living space. The entrance required authorization, and he respected the boundary, making a mental note to ask Lion about it upon her return. His assignment as biosecurity consultant gave him legitimate reasons to assess such facilities, but guest etiquette took precedence for now. The lower level proved more interesting, with the exercise area Lion had shown him and several storage rooms containing supplies for Asgar's care. One room particularly caught Dylan's attention, a grooming station equipped with specialized brushes, cleaning solutions, and what appeared to be a large drainage basin. "Does she bathe you regularly?" Dylan asked, examining the setup. Asgar approached, sniffing the brushes and making a soft clicking sound with his multiple hinged jaw. "I suppose maintaining those scales requires some care." Dylan checked the time. The evening was advancing, and he decided to proceed with Asgar's feeding ahead of the automated schedule. The nutrition dispensary in the kitchen area held various prepared portions of what looked like synthesized protein compounds. "Let's see. Evening meal protocol," Dylan murmured, selecting the appropriate container. The contents had an unusual bluish tint and a dense, fibrous texture. Asgar, sensing the feeding ritual beginning, positioned himself near his designated eating area, a recessed section of floor lined with a material that appeared easy to clean. Dylan placed the food in a wide, shallow bowl, as indicated in Lion's instructions. "Here you go. Enjoy your dinner." Asgar approached the bowl, but instead of immediately consuming the meal, he looked up at Dylan expectantly. After several moments of this standoff, Dylan consulted the instructions again. "Ah, I see. Lion notes that you prefer company during meals." Dylan pulled up a sitting cushion and positioned himself near the thyroid. "Better?" Apparently satisfied, Asgar began to eat, using his front limbs with surprising dexterity to manage the food. Dylan observed with fascination, noting how the creature's jaw structure allowed for both tearing and grinding motions, adaptations that suggested an omnivorous diet rather than the strictly carnivorous one typically associated with predator species. "You're full of surprises, aren't you?" Dylan commented, making mental notes for his personal research journal. The thyroid paused momentarily, as if acknowledging the observation, before returning to his meal. After dinner, Dylan explored the dwelling's communication system, ensuring he understood how to contact Lion if necessary. The Arvinian technology was sophisticated, but intuitive, integrating seamlessly with the natural structure of the mountain home. As the evening progressed, Dylan settled into a comfortable routine with Asgar, who seemed content to remain near him. The thyroid occasionally brought objects to show him, a textured ball that emitted soft lights when manipulated, a length of flexible material that might have been a toy, a small container that produced harmonious tones when tilted at various angles. "You're quite the communicator, aren't you?" Dylan remarked, accepting each item and examining it before returning it. "Are you showing me your treasures, or are you testing my reactions?" Asgar blinked his 3 eyes in sequence, a gesture Dylan couldn't interpret but found endearing nonetheless. The creature's behavior was remarkably social for a species classified as a dangerous predator. It reinforced Dylan's long-standing belief that official classifications often fail to capture the true complexity of alien life forms. As the dwelling's lighting dimmed automatically to simulate nightfall, Dylan prepared for rest. Lion had designated a guest sleeping area, equipped with accommodations suitable for human physiology, a thoughtful detail that spoke to her attention to xenobiological differences. "Good night, Asgar," Dylan said as he settled onto the sleeping platform. Tomorrow we'll get to know each other better. The thyroid, who had his own sleeping area nearby, emitted a soft, melodious sound that Dylan interpreted as acknowledgement. As he drifted toward sleep, Dylan reflected on the unexpected turn his assignment had taken. What had begun as a routine security assessment had transformed into a rare opportunity to observe a misunderstood species in a domestic environment. Little did he know that the following day would bring discoveries that would challenge the foundations of Arvinian xenobiology, and all it would take was a simple bath. Morning arrived with a gradual brightening of the crystal formations embedded in the dwelling's walls. Dylan awoke to find Asgar already active, patiently waiting near the sleeping platform with an expectant posture. "Good morning to you too," Dylan greeted, checking his timepiece. "I see you're an early riser." After refreshing himself in the dwelling's sanitizing chamber, which utilized sound waves rather than water for cleaning, Dylan prepared for the day ahead. Asgar's morning feeding proceeded smoothly, with the thyroid once again demonstrating remarkable table manners for a creature classified as a ferocious predator. "Lion mentioned you enjoy morning exercise," Dylan said after they had both eaten. "Shall we try the outdoor enclosure?" Asgar responded with an enthusiastic body motion that Dylan interpreted as agreement. They descended to the lower level, where Dylan activated the mechanism that opened the reinforced door to the external area. The morning air of Arvin was crisp and oxygen-rich, causing Dylan's atmospheric adapter to work more actively to regulate his breathing. The view from the enclosure was spectacular. Rugged mountain slopes descended toward distant valleys, all under a sky that held a subtle lavender tint unlike Earth's blue. Asgar moved with surprising agility across the natural terrain of the enclosure, his 6 limbs allowing him to navigate both level ground and steep inclines with equal ease. Dylan observed the thyroid's behavior, noting how he marked certain territories with scent glands located at the base of his limbs, a behavior typical of apex predators, establishing boundaries. "You're quite at home out here, aren't you?" Dylan commented. "I imagine these mountains are your natural habitat." After about 30 minutes of vigorous activity, Asgar returned to Dylan's side, his scales glistening with exertion. It was then that Dylan noticed something he hadn't observed the previous evening. The thyroid scales were accumulating a fine layer of organic particulate matter, particularly in the crevices between the ridges along his back. "You're a bit dirty there, my friend," Dylan observed, gently touching one of the affected areas. Asgar responded by positioning himself in a way that seemed to invite assistance. "Ah, I see. Is this why Lion has that grooming station set up?" They returned inside, and Dylan led the way to the grooming room he had discovered during his exploration. The setup now made perfect sense. Asgar needed regular maintenance to keep his scale beds clean and healthy. Dylan examined the various brushes and solutions available, selecting ones that seemed appropriate for the task. "I'm not exactly sure of the proper technique here," he admitted to Asgar, "but we'll figure it out together." He began with a dry brush, gently removing loose particles from between Asgar's ridges. The thyroid remained perfectly still, occasionally emitting contented sounds that suggested Dylan was performing adequately. As he worked, Dylan noticed areas where the accumulated matter was more stubborn, particularly around the base of the protective head ridges. "I think we might need something stronger for these spots," he murmured, examining the cleaning solutions Lion had stored nearby. One container held a gel-like substance with a label indicating it was specifically formulated for thyroid scale maintenance. Another contained what appeared to be a foaming agent with natural cleansers. Dylan opted for the latter, applying a small amount to a wet brush. "Let's try this, shall we?" As the brush made contact with Asgar's scales, something unexpected happened. The cleaning solution began to foam dramatically, creating a substantial layer of suds across the thyroid's back. Asgar's reaction was immediate and startling. All 3 eyes widened, and he emitted a series of melodious trills that increased in both pitch and volume. Dylan froze, concerned he had caused discomfort or alarm. "I'm sorry, is it irritating? Should I stop?" But Asgar's body language didn't suggest distress. Instead, the thyroid began a rhythmic movement, almost like a dance, causing the suds to spread further across his scaled body. The trilling continued, now accompanied by a harmonic undertone that resonated pleasantly in the grooming chamber. "You like this?" Dylan asked, bewildered. He cautiously resumed brushing, applying more of the foaming solution to areas he hadn't yet reached. Asgar's response was unmistakable. The creature was experiencing what could only be described as intense pleasure. As the grooming session continued, Dylan found himself laughing at the absurdity of the situation. Here was a species classified as one of the most dangerous predators on Arvin, practically purring with delight as it was covered in soap suds. "The xenobiologist would never believe this," Dylan remarked, now thoroughly enjoying himself as he worked the foaming cleanser into every crevice of Asgar's scale beds. The fearsome thyroid, reduced to a puddle of bliss by a simple bath. By the time he had finished, Asgar was completely covered in white foam, only his violet eyes visible amid the suds. The thyroid's trilling had transformed into a continuous harmonic humming that seemed to express pure contentment. "Now we need to rinse you off," Dylan explained, guiding Asgar toward the drainage basin. The facility included a gentle spray system, which Dylan activated at a low setting. "Here we go, nice and easy." As the water flowed over Asgar's body, washing away the suds, the thyroid continued his musical vocalizations, occasionally shaking himself to assist in the rinsing process. The water runoff revealed scales that now gleamed with vibrant colors, the crimsons more intense, the golds more lustrous. "You clean up nicely," Dylan commented, using a soft cloth to help dry the creature once the rinsing was complete. "I bet you feel much better now." Asgar responded by nuzzling against Dylan's shoulder, leaving a damp patch on his clothing, but conveying unmistakable gratitude. The entire grooming process had created a new level of bond between them, transcending the initial acceptance of the previous day. As they returned to the main living area, Dylan noticed something remarkable. Asgar was now exhibiting behaviors he hadn't shown before. The thyroid retrieved a wooden box from a recessed shelf, manipulating a simple locking mechanism with his front limbs to open it. Inside were what appeared to be carved symbols, which Asgar began to arrange on the floor in a specific pattern. "What are you doing?" Dylan asked, kneeling beside the thyroid to observe more closely. Asgar selected symbols with deliberate care, placing them in what seemed to be a meaningful sequence. When he had arranged about a dozen symbols, he looked at Dylan expectantly. "Are you trying to communicate with me?" Dylan's professional excitement surged. He examined the symbols, noting their geometric designs and consistent patterns. "Is this some kind of language?" Asgar made an affirmative motion, selecting another symbol and placing it at the end of the sequence. Dylan studied the arrangement, recognizing that this was far beyond typical animal behavior. This was deliberate communication. "Lion never mentioned you could do this," Dylan murmured, his mind racing with implications. "This suggests linguistic capability, abstract thinking." He paused, realizing the significance. "This would place you well above a Category 4 classification in cognitive abilities." For the remainder of the day, Dylan worked with Asgar on this unexpected form of communication. He quickly realized that the symbols represented a simplified form of Arvinian logographic writing, adapted to be manageable with Asgar's limb structure. The thyroid had a vocabulary of perhaps 100 symbols, enough to express basic needs, observations, and even some abstract concepts. By evening, Dylan had documented dozens of symbol combinations and their apparent meanings. Asgar could identify objects, express preferences, and even convey simple temporal concepts like soon and later. This was revolutionary, No officially recognized research had ever demonstrated this level of linguistic capacity in thyroids. "This changes everything about how your species is classified," Dylan told Asghar as they shared the evening meal. "Why has Lion kept this secret? This should be published, studied." Asghar arranged a new sequence of symbols on the floor beside them. Dylan had learned enough to roughly translate: others, not ready. Fear. Others aren't ready? They fear your kind? Dylan considered this. I suppose that makes sense. Arvinian classification systems are notoriously resistant to revision. Demonstrating advanced cognition in a species classified as a dangerous predator would challenge fundamental assumptions. As night fell, Dylan found himself unable to sleep, his mind buzzing with questions and implications. He accessed his personal data tablet, reviewing official documentation on thyroids and finding it woefully inadequate in light of what he had observed. Asghar, perhaps sensing his restlessness, brought another object Dylan hadn't seen before, a small projection device that, when activated, displayed three-dimensional images of various locations in the Vidya mountain range. One sequence showed a hidden valley, where multiple thyroids gathered in what appeared to be a social grouping, engaging in coordinated activities that suggested complex social structures. "Is this where you come from?" Dylan asked, fascinated by the imagery. "A thyroid community." Asghar arranged symbols: home, family. The revelation was staggering. Thyroids weren't solitary predators as officially classified. They were social creatures with family units and communal behaviors. Everything about the official understanding of the species was wrong. As Dylan finally settled in for sleep, his last thought was that the simple act of giving Asghar a bath had somehow unlocked a level of trust that had opened the door to these revelations. Something so ordinary had led to something extraordinary, a pattern that would continue in the days ahead. On the second day of Lion's absence, Dylan's relationship with Asghar deepened further. The morning began with another grooming session, now established as a mutually enjoyable ritual, followed by more extensive communication practice. Dylan had begun documenting the symbol language systematically, creating a preliminary lexicon that already contained over 100 entries. "Your cognitive abilities are remarkable," he told Asghar, as they worked through increasingly complex exchanges. "The implication that your entire species possesses this capacity is revolutionary." Asghar arranged symbols that Dylan now translated with growing confidence. "Different individuals, different abilities, like your people. You understand the concept of individual variation within a species." Dylan noted, impressed. "That's a sophisticated abstraction." Their communication session was interrupted by an alert from the dwelling security system, an approaching transport vessel. Dylan checked the monitoring system and saw an official Arvinian Science Council vehicle descending toward the landing platform. "We have a visitor," he informed Asghar, whose posture immediately became more alert, his head ridges slightly elevated in what Dylan now recognized as a defensive stance. "You don't like council officials, I take it?" Asghar arranged symbols quickly. "Inspection, threat." Dylan frowned, concerned by the thyroid's obvious distress. "Stay calm. I'll handle this." The security monitor showed a single Arvinian disembarking from the transport, a tall, lean figure, with skin that maintained a steady, silver-gray luminescence, suggesting a controlled emotional state. The visitor wore the distinctive insignia of a council inspector. Dylan activated the communication system. "This is Dylan Harrison, temporary caretaker for xenobiologist Lion's residence. How may I assist you?" The Arvinian's expression shifted subtly, a flash of darker coloration briefly crossing his skin. "Inspector Dorn, Arvinian Science Council. I was not informed of a human presence at this facility. Please verify your authorization." Dylan transmitted his credentials through the system. "I'm the recently appointed biosecurity consultant for the Vidya Research District. Xenobiologist Lion requested my assistance with her domestic arrangements during her attendance at the council gathering. There was a pause as Inspector Dorn reviewed the information. Your credentials appear in order, Mr. Harrison. However, my visit concerns a routine inspection of research facilities in outlying areas. I require access to verify compliance with council regulations. Dylan glanced at Asgar, who had positioned himself in a less visible area of the living space. The Tyroid's behavior suggested he wanted to avoid detection by the inspector. Interesting. Of course, Inspector, Dylan responded smoothly. I should note that I don't have authorization to provide access to Xenobiologist Lion's secure laboratory areas. Those would require her personal codes. The exterior inspection will suffice for now, Dorn replied. Please extend the access platform. Dylan complied, activating the mechanism that would allow the inspector to reach the entrance. As the system operated, he turned to Asgar. Perhaps you should remain in the lower level until this inspection is complete, he suggested quietly. I suspect your presence might complicate matters. Asgar needed no further prompting, quickly descending the spiral staircase to the exercise area below. His behavior confirmed Dylan's growing suspicion that there was something about Asgar, or about Tyroids in general, that might not align with council regulations. When Inspector Dorn entered the dwelling, his gaze immediately swept the space with practiced efficiency. You are alone here, Mr. Harrison? Yes, Dylan confirmed, maintaining a professional demeanor. Just taking care of the dwelling during Xenobiologist Lion's absence. Dorn's skin rippled with subtle patterns that Dylan couldn't interpret. I see. And what exactly are your duties during this caretaking assignment? Environmental system monitoring, security maintenance, general upkeep, Dylan replied smoothly. Nothing that interferes with Xenobiologist Lion's research areas. Of course. The inspector moved through the main living area, his attention focused on the arrangement of research equipment and data storage units. Xenobiologist Lion's work has attracted some attention within the council recently. Her theories regarding species reclassification are considered controversial. Dylan maintained a neutral expression. I wouldn't know about that. My expertise is in biosecurity protocols, not theoretical xenobiology. Indeed. Dorn paused near the shelf where Asgar had retrieved his communication symbols, which Dylan had fortunately returned to their box. I noticed distinctive organic particulates in this dwelling, consistent with the scale shedding of large reptilian species. Dylan tensed internally, but kept his outward composure. Xenobiologist Lion's fieldwork involves multiple species. I believe she maintains temporary specimen holding facilities on the lower level for observation purposes. Does she? Dorn's skin darkened slightly. That would require specific permits for live specimen containment, particularly for Category 3 or higher species. I'm sure all her permits are in order, Dylan replied. As I mentioned, I'm not privy to the details of her research program. The inspector seemed about to press further when a subtle alert sounded from his communication device. He checked it, his expression shifting to one of what appeared to be satisfaction. It seems my inspection will need to be more thorough than anticipated, Dorn announced. The Council has just implemented Emergency Protocol 7A for this research sector. All facilities must be examined for potential biosecurity breaches. Dylan frowned. I'm not familiar with that protocol. As the assigned biosecurity consultant, I should have been notified of any emergency measures. The protocol was activated moments ago, Dorn explained, a note of smugness in his tone. It authorizes inspection of all areas, including secured research sections, when evidence suggests the presence of unauthorized Category 4 or higher organisms. A cold realization settled over Dylan. This wasn't a routine inspection. It was targeted. Somehow, the Council had learned about Asgar. I still can't grant access to secured areas without Xenobiologist Lion's authorization, Dylan maintained firmly. That would violate basic research protection statutes. Dorn's skin pulsed with irritation. Emergency Protocol 7A supersedes those statutes, Mr. Harrison. But if you insist on formalities... He activated his communication device. I am establishing direct contact with xenobiologist Lion at the council chambers. After a brief delay, Lion's holographic image appeared in the center of the room. Her expression shifted rapidly from confusion to alarm when she saw Dorn standing in her dwelling. Inspector Dorn, she acknowledged, her skin flickering with evident distress. What is the meaning of this intrusion? The Council has activated Emergency Protocol 7A for the video research sector, Dorn informed her. We have received credible information regarding an unauthorized Category 4 organism being maintained at your facility. Lion's holographic image glanced briefly at Dylan, a silent question in her eyes. He gave a subtle nod, confirming her unspoken concern about Asgar. My research permits allow for temporary observation of various species, Lion stated carefully. All properly documented in my quarterly reports. This is not about temporary observation specimens, Dorn countered. We have information regarding a permanent resident thyroid being kept as a pet. He pronounced the last word with evident distaste. Such an arrangement violates multiple council regulations regarding dangerous predator species. Lion's image flickered as her actual body presumably experienced a strong emotional response. I protest this invasion of my private dwelling. Any specimens I maintain are fully documented in my research records. Then you won't object to a complete inspection, Dorn concluded. Since there's nothing to hide. The silence that followed was telling. Finally, Lion addressed Dylan directly. Mr. Harrison, please cooperate with Inspector Dorn's legitimate inquiries. I will return immediately from the council gathering. The holographic communication ended, leaving Dylan alone with the increasingly triumphant inspector. Now then, Dorn said, his skin brightening with satisfaction. Shall we begin with the lower level? That seems the most logical place for specimen containment. Dylan knew he had to make a decision quickly. Asgar was clearly more than just a pet. He was a sentient being with advanced cognitive abilities, capable of communication and complex social behavior. Allowing him to be seized by the Council under this emergency protocol would be unconscionable. Before we proceed, Inspector, I should inform you that I've been conducting my own preliminary biosecurity assessment during my stay here, Dylan stated, playing for time. I'd like to retrieve my equipment from the guest quarters before we continue. Dorn made a gesture of impatient assent. Be quick about it. In the guest area, Dylan hurriedly accessed his data tablet, sending an encrypted message to Lion's personal communication channel rather than her official council contact. Asgar in danger. Emergency Protocol 7A. Dorn seeking to seize him. Need extraction plan. Abilities documented. Will protect. He grabbed his atmospheric adapter adjustment tool, which doubled as a multifunctional device with several useful features, and returned to find Dorn already moving toward the spiral staircase to the lower level. After you, Inspector, Dylan offered with forced politeness. As they descended, Dylan's mind raced through possibilities. He needed to protect Asgar while maintaining the appearance of cooperation. The thyroid's welfare depended on him navigating this situation carefully. The lower level appeared empty when they reached it. No sign of Asgar in the main exercise area. Dorn moved methodically through the space, his attention focused on the environmental controls and containment systems. Sophisticated setup for mere temporary observation, he commented, his tone accusatory. These are long-term habitat accommodations. Dylan remained silent, watching the inspector's movements while trying to locate Asgar through peripheral vision. Where had the thyroid hidden himself? Dorn approached the reinforced door leading to the exterior enclosure. This requires a security override, he announced, producing an official access device from his uniform. Council authority. As the door began to slide open, Dylan noticed a subtle movement from a shadowed alcove near the grooming station. Asgar was concealed there, perfectly still, except for his 3 violet eyes, which blinked in sequence as they had when he was trying to communicate something important. Dorn stepped through the doorway into the exterior enclosure, his attention immediately drawn to the signs of regular use: worn paths, territorial markings, evidence of a large creature's habitual presence. "As I suspected," he declared, turning back toward Dylan with an expression of vindication. "Clear evidence of an unauthorized Category 4 predator species being maintained as a domestic companion. A clear violation of Council Directive 355B regarding dangerous organism containment." Dylan maintained his composure with effort. "I'm not qualified to make determinations about Council regulations. I suggest we wait for xenobiologist Lyon's return to clarify the situation." "That won't be necessary," Dorn replied, activating his communication device. "I am authorizing immediate extraction of the thyroid specimen under Emergency Protocol 7A. A containment team will arrive shortly to secure the creature for proper relocation to a Council facility." This was the moment of decision. Dylan couldn't allow Asgar to be taken, not now that he understood the thyroid's true nature and capabilities. But direct opposition to a Council inspector would have serious consequences, potentially ending his assignment and any chance of helping Lyon protect Asgar in the long term. Just as Dylan was weighing his options, Asgar made the decision for him. The thyroid emerged from his hiding place, moving with deliberate grace toward the exterior doorway where Dorn stood. The inspector froze, his skin paling dramatically at the sudden appearance of the creature he had been discussing. "Stand back," Dorn stammered, reaching for what appeared to be a defensive device at his belt. "This creature is dangerous." Before either Dylan or Dorn could react further, Asgar did something unexpected. Instead of showing aggression, he carefully arranged himself in a non-threatening posture, lowered his head, and produced a soft, melodious sound, unlike anything Dylan had heard from him before. Dorn's response was immediate and revealing. His skin flashed with patterns that suggested recognition and alarm. "It can't be," he whispered, taking an involuntary step backward. "That's a Feladrax communication sequence." Dylan looked between the inspector and Asgar, sensing a critical revelation. "Feladrax? What's a Feladrax?" The inspector seemed to remember Dylan's presence and quickly composed himself. "Nothing that concerns you, human. This situation has become a matter of planetary security." He reached again for his communication device. "Containment Team Priority 1. The specimen is confirmed to be—" He never finished the sentence. With a speed that belied his size, Asgar moved past both of them and into the exterior enclosure, pausing only briefly to look back at Dylan, with all 3 eyes focused intently. "He wants us to follow," Dylan realized aloud, already moving toward the doorway. "Stop!" Dorn commanded. "That creature is now under Council jurisdiction. Interfering with its containment is a serious offense." Dylan made his decision. "I'm a biosecurity consultant doing my job, assessing a potential biosecurity situation. If you want to stop me, you'll have to explain why you prevented a Council-appointed official from performing his duties." Without waiting for a response, Dylan rushed after Asgar, who was already navigating the exterior enclosure toward what appeared to be a concealed path leading further up the mountainside. Dorn's shouts faded behind them as Dylan followed the thyroid, trusting that whatever Asgar was leading him toward was important enough to justify this drastic action. The path was steep and would have been nearly invisible to someone unfamiliar with the terrain. It wound upward through narrow passages between rock formations, occasionally requiring Dylan to scramble on all 4s to keep pace with the naturally agile thyroid. "Where are we going?" Dylan called out, his atmospheric adapter working overtime to compensate for the exertion. "What's a Feladrax?" Asgar didn't slow his pace, but occasionally looked back to ensure Dylan was still following. After about 20 minutes of strenuous climbing, they reached what appeared to be a dead end, a sheer rock face blocking further progress. Dylan leaned against a boulder, catching his breath. "Now what?" In answer, Asgar approached the rock face and pressed his body against a specific section. To Dylan's astonishment, a portion of the seemingly solid stone shifted, revealing a narrow passage barely visible in the natural light. "A hidden entrance," Dylan murmured. "Impressive." Asgar entered the passage, and Dylan followed, his scientific curiosity overwhelming any hesitation. The passage extended for perhaps 100 meters, gradually widening until it opened into something Dylan could never have anticipated. A vast, hidden valley nestled within the mountain range, invisible from the outside world. The valley was breathtaking, a self-contained ecosystem with its own microclimate. Lush vegetation, unlike anything Dylan had seen in the more exposed areas of Arvin, and most remarkably, dozens of tyroids moving freely throughout the landscape. "This is incredible," Dylan whispered, taking in the scene. "A complete tyroid community, hidden from Arvinian science." As they descended into the valley, Dylan noticed that the tyroids weren't merely existing in proximity to one another. They were engaged in organized activities. Some appeared to be cultivating specific plant species in designated areas. Others were constructing what looked like communal shelters using natural materials. Juvenile tyroids played in groups, practicing behaviors that Dylan recognized as skill development rather than mere recreation. This wasn't a collection of dangerous predators. It was a civilization. Asgar led Dylan toward a central clearing where several larger tyroids had gathered, apparently alerted to their arrival. One massive individual, its scales a deeper crimson than Asgar's, with gold markings that formed intricate patterns, stepped forward to meet them. The communication that followed was unlike anything Dylan had witnessed. Asgar and the larger tyroid exchanged a complex series of sounds, postures, and subtle movements of their head ridges. No symbols were needed here. This was their natural language, rich and nuanced. After several minutes of this exchange, the larger tyroid turned its attention to Dylan, studying him with all three eyes in perfect alignment, a gesture that somehow conveyed intense focus. "Hello," Dylan offered, unsure of proper protocol, but feeling that silence would be more awkward. "I'm Dylan Harrison. I'm a friend of Asgar's." The large tyroid tilted its head, then produced a sound that seemed to approximate Dylan's name. The vocalization was imperfect, but recognizable, an attempt at human speech. You're trying to speak my language," Dylan realized, amazed. Just as Asgar uses Arvinian symbols to communicate with Lion. The implications were staggering. These weren't merely intelligent animals. They were a non-humanoid sentient species with their own language, social structure, and culture. The Arvinian classification system had completely misidentified them, categorizing a civilization as merely dangerous predators. As Dylan absorbed this revelation, a commotion at the valley's entrance caught his attention. Lion appeared, breathing heavily from what must have been a rapid journey from wherever she had landed her transport. Behind her, looking considerably less composed, was Inspector Dorn. Asgar immediately moved toward Lion, greeting her with familiar affection. Her skin pulsed with relief as she stroked his head ridges. "I see you've discovered the truth," she said to Dylan, her voice carrying across the clearing. "I was going to tell you, but these things require trust." The bath, Dylan realized. When I gave Asgar a bath, it established trust. That's when he started revealing his abilities to me. Lion nodded, her skin brightening. Tyroids, or Pheladrax, as they call themselves, consider grooming a deeply social activity. By bathing Asgar, you unknowingly performed a ritual that identifies trusted individuals in their culture. Inspector Dorn stepped forward, his skin fluctuating between patterns that suggested confusion and outrage. This is a catastrophic breach of Council security protocols. An entire colony of Category 4 predators, hidden within our territory. They're not predators, Inspector, Lion corrected firmly. They're a sentient species with their own language, culture, and social structure. Your classification system is fundamentally flawed. Impossible, Dorn insisted, though his tone lacked conviction as he observed the organized activities throughout the valley. The Council has extensive documentation on thyroid behavior, solitary hunters, territorial, limited cognitive abilities, all based on observations of individuals in stress situations, Lion countered. Captured, isolated, studied in artificial environments. Of course they appeared dangerous and limited. They were traumatized. Dylan moved closer to the conversation. She's right, Inspector. What we're seeing here contradicts everything in the official classification. These beings, the Phaladrax, deserve recognition as a sentient species with all the protections that status entails. Dorn's skin darkened with frustration. Even if what you say is true, and I'm not conceding that it is, this discovery should have been reported through proper Council channels, not hidden away like some personal secret. And what would the Council have done? Lion challenged. Implemented containment protocols? Restricted the valley? Subjected the Phaladrax to invasive studies? The large thyroid that had greeted Dylan earlier approached their group, its presence commanding attention. It produced a series of sounds that Lion appeared to partially understand. This is Morath, the closest translation would be Wisdom Keeper of this community, she explained to Dylan and Dorn. He's expressing concern about Council interference. Dorn's professional training seemed to override his initial shock. I am obligated to report this discovery to the Science Council immediately. This valley is technically within Arvinian territory, which places these Phaladrax under Council jurisdiction. Perhaps we should consider a different approach, suggested a new voice from the valley entrance. All turned to see an elegant Arvinian figure approaching, older than Lion, with skin that maintained a steady, calm blue luminescence despite the charged situation. Counselor Terran, Dorn acknowledged, his posture straightening. I wasn't aware you had left the Council gathering. When I received Lion's urgent message about a potential first contact situation, I felt my presence might be valuable, Terran replied smoothly. Particularly given my position on the Interspecies Relations Committee. Dylan noticed how Terran's arrival shifted the dynamic immediately. Dorn's aggressive stance softened in the presence of a higher-ranking council member, while Lion's skin brightened with what appeared to be hope. First contact? Dorn repeated skeptically. These creatures have been known to our science for generations. Known, but not understood, Terran corrected gently. If what I'm observing here is accurate, we are witnessing something unprecedented. A non-humanoid sentient species with its own civilization, existing alongside our own, without our awareness. The counselor turned to Dylan. I understand you've had some meaningful interaction with these beings. Mr. Harrison, your perspective as an outside observer would be valuable. Dylan described his experiences with Asgar, the communication system, the revealed intelligence, the social behaviors he had observed both in Lion's dwelling and now in the valley. As he spoke, Terran listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions that demonstrated genuine interest rather than skepticism. Most revealing, Terran commented when Dylan had finished. And you believe these beings pose no inherent threat to Arvinian security? None whatsoever, Dylan affirmed. They've maintained this hidden valley for generations without incident. They're not aggressive predators. They're an advanced society that values privacy and has good reason to be cautious about contact with Arvinians, given how they've been classified and treated. Terran turned to Lion. And you've been aware of this situation for how long? 7 standard years, Lion admitted. since I found Asgar injured near my dwelling as a juvenile. Caring for him led to the discovery of this valley and the true nature of his species. I've been studying them with their cooperation, but kept my findings private until I could ensure their protection. A questionable decision from a regulatory standpoint, Terran noted, but an understandable one from an ethical perspective. The counselor studied the valley thoughtfully. This discovery requires a careful approach. Inspector Dorn is correct that standard protocols would demand immediate council oversight, but I believe this situation warrants exceptional handling. Dorn's skin rippled with what Dylan interpreted as disagreement, but he remained silent in the presence of his superior. Terran addressed the gathered Feladrax directly, focusing particularly on Morath. I represent the Arvinian Science Council, the governing body for this territory. I wish to establish peaceful communication between our peoples, with full recognition of your autonomy and intelligence. Morath responded with a series of vocalizations, which Lion attempted to translate. He acknowledges your authority, but expresses concern about Arvinian intentions. The Feladrax have historical memories of capture and study that ended poorly for those involved. A legitimate concern, Terran acknowledged. I propose the following. This valley will be designated a protected territory, with the Feladrax recognized as its rightful inhabitants. A small research team, led by xenobiologist Lion, and including Mr. Harrison as a neutral observer, will serve as the official liaison between your people and the Council. No other Arvinians will enter the valley without explicit permission from both the research team and Feladrax representatives. Dorn could contain himself no longer. Counselor, with all due respect, you don't have the authority to make such arrangements without full council approval. The security implications alone. I have emergency powers as head of the Interspecies Relations Committee, Terran interrupted smoothly. And I'm invoking them now to prevent a potential diplomatic incident. The full council will be informed, of course, but only after preliminary protective measures are in place. The counselor's skin pulsed with patterns that subtly reminded everyone of her senior position. Unless you wish to challenge my authority officially, Inspector. Dorn's skin flickered briefly before settling into a pattern of reluctant acceptance. No, Counselor, but my report will note my reservations. As is your right, Terran acknowledged, before turning back to Morath. Will these arrangements be acceptable to your people while we negotiate more permanent terms? After Lion translated, Morath conferred with several other Feladrax before responding with what appeared to be affirmative sounds and gestures. He agrees to the proposal, Lion confirmed, her skin brightening with evident relief. They welcome peaceful contact but request control over the pace and extent of cultural exchange. A reasonable condition, Terran agreed. I believe we've established a preliminary understanding that serves everyone's interests. The counselor turned to Dylan. Mr. Harrison, your unexpected role in this discovery has proven fortunate. The Earth Interplanetary Exchange Program emphasized your unusual ability to connect with diverse species. It seems they were more prescient than they knew. Dylan smiled, glancing at Asgar, who had remained close throughout the negotiations. Sometimes, understanding begins with the simplest interactions, like giving someone a bath. Lion's skin rippled with what Dylan now recognized as Arvinian amusement. When I returned to find Asgar covered in suds and trilling with delight, I thought I might lose my mind. But it seems it was exactly what needed to happen. As the immediate tension dissipated, Terran began discussing the practical details of the protection arrangement with Lion, while Dorn reluctantly documented the official parameters of the agreement. Dylan found himself drawn deeper into the valley by Asgar, who seemed eager to show him more of the Feladrax community. Throughout the remainder of the day, Dylan was introduced to various aspects of Feladrax culture, their cultivation methods, their communal child-rearing practices, their artistic expressions rendered in natural materials and living plants. Every observation reinforced the profound misunderstanding perpetuated by the Arvinian classification system. As twilight descended on the valley, casting the unique ecosystem in a soft lavender glow, Dylan found himself sitting beside Lion on a natural stone formation overlooking the Feladrax settlement. "Thank you," she said quietly, her skin glowing with gentle patterns that suggested sincerity. "For protecting Asgard. For understanding what I've been trying to do here." "I should be thanking you," Dylan replied. "This is the kind of discovery xenobiologists dream about. A completely misunderstood species. An entire hidden civilization. It's extraordinary." Lion's skin rippled with a pattern Dylan hadn't seen before. Something subtle and complex. "The Council will establish a permanent research outpost near the valley entrance. They've asked me to lead the team." She paused, her next words careful. "They've also approved an extended assignment for an Earth liaison, for cultural exchange purposes." Dylan smiled, understanding the unspoken question. "I'd be honored to accept such an assignment. There's so much more to learn here." "About the Feladrax," Lion agreed, her skin brightening. "And perhaps about other things as well." As they sat together in comfortable silence, Asgard approached, settling between them with a contented sound that required no translation. The Tyroid, no, the Feladrax, had brought them together and, in doing so, had opened a door to understanding that would change two worlds forever. In the days that followed, a new routine established itself. The valley became a protected sanctuary, with Lion's mountain dwelling serving as the primary research station and official point of contact between the Arvinian Science Council and the Feladrax community. Dylan's assignment was extended indefinitely, his unique perspective as a human providing valuable insights into the cross-species communication efforts. Dorn returned to the Council headquarters, his official report carefully worded to protect his position while acknowledging the unprecedented nature of the discovery. Taryn made frequent visits to the valley, her progressive views on interspecies relations finding perfect expression in the developing relationship with the Feladrax. As for Asgard, he chose to divide his time between the valley community and Lion's dwelling, serving as a living bridge between the two worlds. His communication abilities continued to develop, as did those of other Feladrax who expressed interest in broader contact with both Arvinians and humans. One evening, several weeks after the discovery, Dylan was working late in the research station's newly established laboratory. Lion entered quietly, her skin glowing with the soft luminescence that Dylan had come to associate with her more reflective moods. "Thinking about how it all began?" he asked, setting aside his data tablet. "With a bath," she confirmed, a ripple of amusement crossing her skin. "When I returned to find my supposedly ferocious pet covered in suds and trilling with delight. Yes, I nearly lost my mind." Her expression grew more serious. "But in that moment, everything changed. Not just for Asgard and the Feladrax, but for us as well." Dylan nodded, understanding the multiple layers of her meaning. Their professional collaboration had developed into something more personal, a connection that transcended their different species and origins. "Sometimes the most important discoveries begin with the simplest actions," he observed, reaching out, showing care, being willing to see beyond appearances. "A lesson for xenobiologists," Lion agreed, her hand finding his in a gesture that had become familiar. "And perhaps for everyone else as well." Outside, in the valley now illuminated by the gentle bioluminescence of native plants, Asgard and his Feladrax kin moved freely through their ancestral home, no longer hidden, no longer misunderstood, and in the mountain dwelling that had once been merely a research outpost. Two beings from different worlds discovered that understanding and love could bridge even the vastest differences. The simple act of bathing a supposedly ferocious pet had washed away more than dirt. It had cleansed away prejudice, fear, and isolation, revealing the truth that waited beneath the surface all along. That connection was possible wherever beings were willing to look beyond appearances and reach out with compassion and curiosity. And sometimes, that truth emerged in the most unexpected way, covered in suds.